I told them I would talk. Hi, everyone. Hi, how's everyone doing tonight? Thank you all for coming. I really appreciate it. We really appreciate it. I know it's always troubling times these days, but it is really nice to see so many of you here with us today. We really appreciate it for the, I don't know, I'm going to call it the 87th annual State of the Beverage talk. I think we've been doing this for a few years now. It's been wonderful to be partnered with SBA accountants to put this material together for you, to bring everybody together so you have a chance to talk to each other, talk to other people in the industry, get a sense of what people are working on, meet folks who have been here for a long time, people who are just getting started, talk about things that are interesting, relevant to your industry. So we really appreciate it. I'm gonna let Lee make some announcements here, and then we'll get the program started. I'll give you a little bit of a description of how this is going to go down, and then we'll give you some content for a little bit. You guys can eat, drink some beer, and then we'll have a little networking afterwards. And we really appreciate it.
Thank you, Jeff. Hello, everybody. Can you hear me through this? All right, good. Thanks. All right, so I'm Lee Schwartz. I'm the Director of Business Development for SBA Certified Public Accountancy. I think this is year 5. I think so. 5, I think, yeah. So super excited that we can keep doing this and not have to do it virtually like we did last year, which was fine, but this is great. So a couple things real quick. We've had some changes in the last year. So many of you knew Marty Mathias, who had been with us for a while and actually left us in the last year. Marty was very involved with this in this industry. We do have a new team that I was really, really excited to introduce you to today, one of which is Todd Clements, and another of which is Rachel McAlexander. Todd was going to be presenting on the exciting changes in the accounting industry that you can all look forward to, and Rachel was going to cover the same issues, but on the tax side. Unfortunately, because this is 2022 now, and this is the world in which we live, we'll have COVID-related issues and will not be with us. So I'm sorry to disappoint you all that you won't be listening to 15 minutes of accounting and tax overview, and instead just 3 vote meetings. So, you know, those of you who don't know us, SBA has been around since 1974. We are dedicated to the local area here. We're locally owned. We have been since that time, and our focus forever has been on closely held family businesses. So, you know, the local community being strong, doing well is very important to us, which is one reason that this industry is also very important to us, so we like to support it. If anybody has any questions about what we do, feel free to come ask me. We'll also be sending some information. I think you'll get a survey tomorrow via email on the entire event. Please provide feedback. And we'll have a couple of very exciting accounting and tax related some information in there that Todd and Rachel were going to send on. But that'll be it from SBA today. So glad we could all get together. Great to see you all, and enjoy the show.
Thanks. So again, my name is Jeff Glazer. I'm with the law firm of Ogden Glazer Schaefer. We also have with us Aaron Ogden and Colin Schaefer. So you have all 3 of us. We have the Ogden Glazer Schaefer with you here. So we are a business transactional law firm. We do a lot of work in the beverage industry, food and beverage in general, and across a wide range of business transactional issues, intellectual property, buying and selling of businesses, assets, real estate, kind of anything you might need to do in your business, from the licensing side, from the alcohol side of things, all the way through to any of the business transactions that you engage in. We're here to help. But that's not why we're here today. Well, it's a little bit why we're here today. You will get a legal update towards the end. But what we really want to do is provide some really useful information to you. So we have some great speakers lined up. who are going to really help us understand a little bit more about sort of the state of the industry in Wisconsin. We have two really exciting speakers. Erica Jones from Giant Jones Brewery will be our first. Erica is going to talk to us a little bit about the Madison Beverage Coalition, about how the beverage manufacturers here in the Madison area have been able to work together to really collaborate and provide some real support for each other in the industry during a relatively trying time. So, Erica, please. Thank you. Yeah, I think you're first. Right?
Okay, I'm first. So I have to use it. Hi. Is this okay if I talk like this? Okay. Evidently, I'm my can you hear? Evidently, I'm a very excited speaker and performer. So I hope that you all enjoy. Yes, I'm Erica Jones. Many of you know me. Solar Giant Jones Brewing. We are 8.5 years old, located on the near east side of Madison, and women-owned, certified organic brewery, making big beers for everyone, including y'all. Do you want me to use the other thing? Sure. I can do the other thing. What do I push? Forward. Okay. So yeah, great. So here we are. This is us, Madison Beverage Makers. So I guess the main question is, what is it? Jeff alluded to it, but basically we are an organization of Madison area beverage makers. So this is primarily alcoholic beverage producers in the greater Madison area, and we have some, I think we kind of defined that as 100 miles. Is that right? 50 miles. 50? Y'all can, you all know. Yes, they're all going to play one and tell me when I'm not, but yeah, I'm going to just go forward and say this group kind of started, I want to say in 2019, and really started as a way for us to get together and colleagues, just so that we all know what each other is doing and we have some sympathy and empathy and can kind of talk about what's going on. And I think it really started out kind of from a social standpoint of just like, hey, let's get together and hear what's happening and be aware of what each other's doing. So that's kind of why we got started, but I think what happened was there was some organic initiatives that came out of that. Just what we kind of realized, I think, as we were talking was, you know, my next customer is your current customer. My next best customer is your best customer. So how can we kind of share this love and really promote this idea of like, we're all in it together and send my person to you. So I mean, in our neighborhood, we have Boss Meadery, Vintage Brewing Company, Working Draft, State Line, Old Trick Distillery, Giant Jones, Magic Factory, Parched Eagle. There's a ton of different producers within about 9. So it really became obvious when we were like, hey, you know, we were just at such and such place, and like, they told us to come here, and we just wanted to figure out, can we do more of that? How can we send our customers to other great producers that are local, that are, you know, artisans that are creating a really great product? So out of that kind of group of initiatives, which I'll just talk briefly about each of them. This was our fall 2019 bingo tour. This was super fun. This was a really simple idea where we created a bingo card, and you could go and get $1 off a bingo card, get it stamped with the goal of trying to fill your card, and then you could choose a place to get a glass from. That was kind of the prize, I think we should, or whatever y'all want us to. So as you can see, many people completed the bingo tour. They were very excited. I still am an actress. I still have these in my desk. I took this picture like yesterday. But people went around and they got on the stage and they were super excited, and some of them turned them in and some of them didn't. But they were just like, wow, there's all these great producers that I've never been to, and it encouraged them to kind of go beyond maybe their little neighborhood, to go visit other local producers and find something new. So I'm going to talk about the next initiative, which we did 2020, January. We called it Drink Local January. And one thing that I really liked about this initiative was we took this idea of like, sending my customers to you and sort of try to move this word of mouth promotion to social media. This is actually from a post that Star Liquor did, so we kind of extended it out to other retailers. So retailers can also participate and say like, hey, look, drink local January. You know, maybe you want to be sober this month, but otherwise you can support local beverage makers as your New Year's resolution, and then allow them to kind of go and pick other local producers and feature them, which I really liked that the retailers could get involved. We as producers could also get involved to say, hey, look, we're doing Drink Local January. Do you know about us? We're Drink Local. You tag each other, we can hashtag, and just kind of collaborate. You like each other's better. But yeah, you know, just kind of this idea that like we can promote this scene together, and promote like this environment. So others participated. The other fun one that came up from our group was the blind date collaborations, which I thought was a really fun, unique idea. Anybody who wanted to participate, you put your name in a hat, and you got drawn out of the hat with another producer. Could be anybody, could be a cidery and a distillery, and the only rule was make it legal. That was the only rule. So we got some pretty interesting collaborations out of that. These were meant to be released around Valentine's Day. Show some love, you know, for your local fellow producers. And I will just say thank you, Rory. You got a graphic designer make some really cool like marketing materials for us, which is great. But I think one thing that was really nice is that it created some interesting connections. It put producers who might be further away with somebody who's like downtown. So just create a lot of interesting collaborations and connections. But also, the other thing that I think was really neat is that I created this desire to do them all. So y'all might know Darren. This is Darren, but he wanted to try them all. So I went to his Instagram and I got all his pictures because he went into them all. So it was just a way to kind of get our customers out and about and trying all of these different collaborations, meeting new producers through this. So as you see, Darren likes to drink. You like Darren. You like Darren. All right, so he told mom. So sorry, I'm all like, oh yeah, so where have we gone since then? That was like February 2020. We have started to kind of formalize our organization through a trade association, I believe, and on the board. And really what came out of all of this was that we can kind of work to co-promote. And that was kind of the focus of trying to organize. So that's what we're trying to do is, as a group, is I think take the lead on our promotion, right? And be the leaders of what's our beverage scene, rather than kind of riding on these other sort of external things that are happening. So y'all might know I created a Google site because I'm a big dork, but I have some of our past meeting notes, member page, which is updated, but the idea is that we can all kind of go there, collaborate, and have a little place to work on this stuff together. But here were some of our meetings. We recently had one at Time Jones. That was in November. We also did a few Zooms over the pandemic, and I just wanted to see how did this function during the pandemic. We didn't get together all that much, but I think that we found that it was very edifying to like see each other over Zoom and like feel less alone in this situation and realize that we're all going through this and we're all struggling, but like we're still here together and doing it. And I think that just helped me to have that experience throughout the pandemic. So hopefully we can pick this up and keep it going and keep promoting, because like I think this industry has a lot of mutual respect and admiration, and that's what this society is all about. Vaccines. Also, y'all have to add.
She hit all the spots.
Right, I think you're the president. So. Thank you very much. And I just wanted to say before I sit down, it's really great to see you all. And I look forward to collaborating more. Cheers.
Thanks so much. Thanks, Eric. I really think that this is a great model for the city of Madison, the Madison area, but for other folks across the state who are trying to figure out how do we create a sense of place. And I think they've done something really special here that everybody's been able to take advantage of. I think it's a great model for others as they're looking around the state. So next we have Mark Garthwaite, the Executive Director of the Wisconsin Brewers Guild. He's gonna give us an update on some of the legislative issues that have been going on here in the state of Wisconsin. Give us an update on where some of these things stand, where they're going, where they've been, and sort of where we sort of fit in the grand scheme of it. So, Mark.
Thank you, sir. So this is really weird for me because we originally were going to have like shorter speaking periods, so I just kind of wing it, and I don't work well off of notes. But when we realized we had more time to speak, I figured I'd work a little bit of daylight time. So about a year ago, we were at this event, and we noted that there was a new legislature coming into the state capitol. A new Senate Majority Leader, the outgoing Majority Leader, to just be perfectly blunt, was not a friend of our industry. He went off to Congress. I'm sorry for my lobbyist friends in Washington, D.C., but we were pleased to have a new Senate Majority Leader who we have a much better relationship. So that was the open question last year was, are the assembly leaders and the Senate leaders, both in the Republican Party, are they going to get along better than the previous majority leaders? So far, I see yes. And I speak in terms of the issues that interest us, not just broader issues of the state. That might be a different answer. But we're pleased that we have much better relationships inside the Capitol. We've worked at this for a number of years. For any of you who are members of the Brewers Guild, Winery Association, Distillers Guild, and you should be members. We pooled those resources of all three organizations together to what we call the Craft Beverage Coalition, Wisconsin Craft Beverage Coalition. It's been a very, very productive relationship. So we share resources for our advocacy efforts in the Capitol. That's a huge lobbying. Yeah. Oh, not on. Sorry. Can you hear me okay? Yeah. All right. I tested negative recently. So yeah. Do you want me to use this?
I think it'll be better.
Oh, there we go. Record. So more positive engagement inside the Capitol is a better thing. And then to our, as far as I know, I think we have an LA governor's office as well. We're very actively engaged in promoting Wisconsin Craft Brewery Day. I think it was a year ago, maybe it was 2 years ago. We were pleasantly surprised by that. And I think we had some Lieutenant Governor and some dignitaries that came out to breweries for a visit. So sorry for the wineries and distilleries. Hopefully you'll get your day through. But that's not my issue. Just out of curiosity, brewery people here, I'll show an answer so I know who my audience is. Winery people. Even if you're a brewery and a winery and distillery. Okay. So just so you know, most of what I know from background is brewery related, but of course we integrate our advocacy efforts with the wineries and distilleries. So it all ties together. The big picture, and I think Jeff's going to be talking a little bit more about this later, is not everybody is just engaged in one beverage site. And Jeff's going to go into that a little bit more in detail. That's actually a lot of motivation behind a lot of our craft beverage coalition activities, is knowing that, for example, if you're a brewery that makes cider, you're also a winery. So we know that you are subject to brewery regulations, you're also subject to winery regulations. And more of that is happening, so we'll go into. So that kind of guides a lot of our advocacy efforts to try and make sure that we are going back to the original intent of this regulation. It was uniform regulation, so the rules are the same. If you sell alcohol, the rules are the same for you no matter what they are. So we don't have all these confusing situations where some industry members will accuse you of not following the law when it turns out they just don't know how screwed up the law is. So our job is to unscrew the state statute. Said that very diplomatic. All right. I'm a clicker, but I want to hit the next one. We'll starting some of the bills that actually did pass in 2021. The most high-profile one, of course, is cocktails to go. It was very gratifying to be invited by one of the authors of the bill to discuss it before it was introduced. That's a new thing for us. So I'm very gratified that the authors of the bill, turns out one of them in the assembly was somebody who went to college with. He didn't stop. But the way it was described initially to us was, well, we're just legalizing cookies, which was not what I was expecting to hear, but and I don't think that's really what it is. But basically, the only issues that we had to draw attention to policymakers of even a simple bill like this isn't as straightforward as you might think it is, because the way the bill was written was assuming that anyone that sells liquor has a Class B liquor license, right? Wrong. There are about 20 breweries in the state of Wisconsin that are grandfathered breweries. I don't know if you know what that means, but basically, from repeal of prohibition all the way to 2011, breweries were authorized to get liquor licenses, just like brew pubs currently do. That authorization was taken away by statute in 2011. But if you had that authority, or were legally allowed to do that before that law passed, you were grandfathered by statute. So the examples are Gale Asylum, Lakefront Brewery, Sprecher, Titletown, Hinterland. They actually are authorized to sell cocktails and wine with no license at all. It's kind of strange. So the effect of a bill, so why do we care as breweries about the cocktails to go bill? Well, because we have brew pubs that have Class B licenses, so that would allow them to sell cocktails to us. But it was also important to us to remind legislators that laws that this esteemed body passed allow some breweries to sell cocktails, but this bill will exclude them and not allow them to sell the cocktails. Same thing for distilleries. Distilleries were excluded. They sell cocktails at their distillery, but they were not allowed to sell cocktails to go because they're not allowed to hold a liquor license. So this is why we get engaged to educate policymakers. Say even a simple bill isn't so simple. It affects us all differently, and what we are seeking is a level playing field for everyone, right? So the effect of that bill, I don't know. I think there are a lot of crowler machines being used to crowler up brandy old fashions every now and then. I don't know who needs 32 ounces of brandy old fashioned, but we might anyway. At 39, this. And by the way, if anybody has questions, just shout it out. Yeah.
Is there anything on that cocktails to go front for distilleries or people who don't hold liquor license?
The answer is no. When we brought this to the attention of the authors, what they said to us was, just write it up as a different bill. I'll offer it. But we all know that that's not going to happen. So the only reason cocktails to go made it was because families wanted it. As a reminder, the chairman of the committee, where all legislation goes, is a form. So that's always an obstacle, right? So we do that. So the unfortunate answer is no. Not going to happen, probably. But we have bigger issues. I bring up this Road America bill only as a curiosity because they had a problem where, I don't know if you know what Road America is, this giant racetrack in Wisconsin, but it turns out it's so big, it's actually in 2 different municipalities, which really screws up the licensing issue for alcohol beverages. So they would have to do this cockamamie thing where they would get nonprofit organizations that set up concession stands just to do full temporary Class B licenses. It was all just kind of a really weird thing. So In the last legislative session, that exact bill was tacked on, had a whole bunch of other stuff, little poison bills that were going to screw some of you guys tacked onto it. So unfortunately, our new Senate Majority Leader ally was the author of that bill and getting killed. But he was very gracious about it. He understood the reason why we had to split it. It came back again in this session, and it was just a clean bill, passed just fine. So now the Department of Revenue will issue Class B permits, similar to basically functionally the same Class B license, to vendors at road barrier, right? So why do we care about this? We don't care about it too much. We did the last session. So, but there was another bill that's been floating around for a long time that really has personally bugged me, just because I'm a nerd, but and I believe Wisconsin, and it drives me crazy that the Wisconsin State Fair plasters Budweiser. Drives me crazy. Like, this is Wisconsin, damn it. Why are we featuring Wisconsin products, even if it's by another big brewery in Milwaukee? I can tolerate that. Act 43, it turns out the State Fair has been a real thorn in the side of regulators for a long time. And I can go back probably 5-6 years when it first came up, and I didn't really understand what the deal was. But it turns out the State Fair has the same situation where half of the state fairgrounds is in Milwaukee. The other half is in West Dallas. So it's in 2 different municipalities. So it also happens that the State Fair, which is a quasi-state agency, it's like umbrella under Department of Administration, I think, had been illegally selling alcohol for years. So regulators were really urging them to finally get this cleaned up. So this bill has made appearances here and there, and the thing that caught our interest is that we already know that State Fair is basically a pay-to-play operation. And so basically that means if you want your beers to be served at Wisconsin State Fair, you have $4 money, which is normally illegal everywhere in the state, right? Well, the conundrum becomes, well, if they're not even legally selling alcohol, are we breaking the law by paying them to sell our beer? Well, it turns out we're breaking the law by even selling them beer. So it was important for us to get this cleaned up too. It was also important for the Winery Association, which conducts wine sales at the State Fair every year. How to make that legal, normally legal, right? So the long story short, I know I'm drawing this out, is that we had to push to make sure. Originally, they wanted to let the State Fair just sell beer without any licenses, right? Where this idea of no licenses comes from, I don't know. But the effect of that is that means all the rules and regulations that apply to all of you suddenly don't apply to the State Fair at all, right? So that's an invitation for pay to play, like nobody's business. If it's that good for a small producer, absolutely not. It's going to be all Budweiser, all big producer, Gallo, whatever. You guys don't have a chance. You can't afford to pay these. So we managed to actually get the bill amended in a way and actually have cooperation with wholesalers to now it's actually the State Fair itself has the authority to issue Class B permits to vendors at the State Fair. So they have to at least follow some of the trade practice regulations that all of you have to follow and all other bars and taverns have to follow. But it creates a new exception that allows sponsorships. And we all know what that means. It's basically like, well, we'll follow all those rules, but hey, we'll sponsor your beer vendor sales for as long as you don't have those other guys. So it was a partial win, partial loss. More on those sponsorship issues later. We'll go really quickly here. Click and collect. That is a bill that never made it out of committee. It was basically the same deal with licensees with grocery stores really want this. So if you can get your online order for your groceries, pull up the Hy-Vee little building over there, and they put your groceries in the car and you drive away, right? Can't do that with alcohol. Legally, you have to go inside and make a face-to-face purchase. Grocers would really like to just be able to have people order online your limousine drive, and then just have the trunk of your car, right? That's not going to go anywhere for a little while, probably. It light, see the light of day. Delivery was another issue. I had a lot of conversations with authors of those bills because once they became aware of the issue of allowing retailers to deliver in Wisconsin, there's a question about whether they would legally be obligated to allow retailers from out of state to deliver. And that's a big issue for distributors. They do not want anyone of the distributors putting any alcohol beverages on a truck. That's probably not going to go anywhere. The 8250, that was there was a whole list of new penalties, steep penalties for alcohol beverage violations. Some of them were patently absurd and draconian. We managed to knock that back. That would come back up again later on, but there are provisions of that. That was actually a bill that was requested by revenue. And then the retailer purchases from other retailers. There are bars and taverns that are frustrated they can't get product from their distributor. And it'll take multiple weeks before they can get new round of Wisconsin products, right? There are penalties for if a bar owner goes to Costco and comes out and takes a case of whatever alcohol beverages to their bar. That's a no. There are various penalties. This was a bill to lower those penalties, so that way the lawbreakers could feel a little bit better about breaking the law, right? All right. To the federal side of things, this to me, the executive order that came out in July from the Biden administration. You may have heard that the Biden administration is really taking the issue of monopoly and antitrust very seriously, which I think is good for small producers. But most interestingly, he specifically issued, as part of that executive order, an order promoting competition in the beer, wine, and spirits market, basically asking or requiring the Department of Treasury, which is housed, requiring Treasury, the Secretary of Treasury, to take in comments from industry and also work with the Attorney General, that'd be the Department of Justice, and also the FTC, Federal Trade Commission, on what issues need to be addressed for competition. And I think, like I said, I don't do well with the notes here, but to quote it, it was assessing the current market structure and conditions of competition for beer, wines, spirits, including an assessment of any threats to competition, barriers to entrance. So the interesting thing is, they put up this comment period and they were saying, Treasury has to issue a report by November 3rd. Industry members like the Brewers Association, Wine Institute, Discus, they all submitted comments, but also asked for more time to submit comments. The comment window was very narrow. So they actually extended that comment period. If you go to that website, you can see that there are 800-some comments. And if you read through a lot of those, you probably would be very disappointed to work with this. It's a lot of small producers basically laying out all the naughty stuff that happens out in the market. The big trade associations, including the Brewers Association, submitted comments. The initial set in that narrow window were pretty tame. They were drawing attention to category management practices. So you have these set cabinets at grocery stores that basically favor products that are in their distribution house. And, if you're not that distributor, your distributor's not a set cabinet when you're on the lower shelf. So-called sponsorship arrangements, like I just mentioned. I mean, sports stadiums are often entertainment venues often run fast and loose with sponsorship agreements where, like, if you're a big sponsor, your beer's on tap and nobody else is on tap. Some states, there are exceptions to state law for that, many are not. TTB has actually taken some enforcement actions. Colorado is the biggest state in the state at the time doing that. And then, what they were suggesting, the Brewers Association in these comments were, when you set penalties for violators, if it's Anheuser-Busch InBev, $5 million fine is like nothing. It's the cost of doing business, right? So they're suggesting, why don't we set your penalty structure commensurate with the size of the violator or the size of their market share, so that the penalties actually have some teeth. I thought that was a pretty provocative proposal. And then also, the original trade practice tied house laws that were devised were intended to protect small mom and pop retailers, right? And they still are to protect small retailers from the big bats or big bad wineries, big bad distilleries. That script is flipped in a lot of cases where we have a lot of really small breweries, a lot of small wineries, a lot of small distilleries up against hypothetical retailers called like complete wine and spirits. Who can make national purchasing decisions and impose them down from state to state. And that actually, like, I don't think they need protection from all of you. The point being, like, you know, some of their behaviors where they're requiring you to buy coupons and pay out on those coupons in order to have your products served at their establishments. Why is that okay? Right? Why is, like, you have the market power over me, the brewery? Why is that okay? You know, like the Brewers Association is saying, you should probably look into that because the days of the mom and pop, you know, are a lot different from the days of the big box. The second round of comments. So when the comment period was extended, the Brewers Association also went, who they just like spared no niceties. They really went pretty hard on some of the issues that are going out in the marketplace, particularly with wholesalers. They went no holds barred, and I would encourage you to go there and find the Brewers Association comments, find the wine comments, because they're very really revealing, and they really hold no punches. So it'll be really interesting to see what happens with this. Unfortunately, a lot of this stuff is regulated state by state, so there's probably not a great deal that regulators at the federal level can do to address some of the things that are regulated at the state level. But there are instances where, particularly in beer, like if there's a similar state statute to federal statute, then the federal TTB can come in and take enforcement. Whether they would actually have the resources to do that is. All right, legislative priorities very quickly. Restaurant Revitalization Fund. That was really important to a lot of your brew pub or any of you that operate restaurants, or for your retail friends in the retail sector who operate restaurants. Those funds were these were coronavirus relief funds. Those were rapidly depleted. So there are a whole bunch of restaurants out there that are really rough shape that never had the opportunity to access those funds. I know at the federal level, Brewers Association and state guilds, nationally, we all have weekly calls where we discuss some of these strategies. We've been strongly urging along with Restaurant Association to refund or reallocate more funds toward RRF for those who missed out on it. That's really important to a lot of you. You rely on them to sell your products as well. And if they're not healthy, then you're not healthy. So it's important to you just as it is for them. United States Postal Service, there's a USPS shipping act that it always shows up. That basically it's not legal for, if it's legal, so almost every state, 48 states, where you can legally ship wine direct to consumers or wineries can do that. There's only like 9, 10 states where beer can do that, maybe 7 or so states where liquor can be shipped. But in no instances can any of that be shipped by the United States Postal Service. That is forbidden the federal law. You can only use the common carriers that are UPS and FedEx and all those guys. This bill just keeps coming up. It's getting expired. California just keeps bringing it up. It's kind of funny. It's probably never going to go anywhere, but it keeps coming up. And since it's come up again, Brewers Association just said, and along with the Wine and Spirits Trade Association, like, let's just push it. So they're making the push. We probably won't see anything. And then the direct consumer issues. Jeff's going to talk a little bit about that. Really, the Brewers Association has made a big push. Usually they've been pretty quiet and non-committal over direct consumer shipping, but they've been hearing the calls from a lot of small breweries around the country that they really want this. Discus for the distilleries, they very much want this. So to pool those two organizations up, obviously wholesalers adamantly oppose it, but the Brewers Association is no longer taking that neutral stance. They're forcefully urging that states change their direct-to-consumer shipping laws. It's a little bit of a shift in public posturing on that issue. So I feel like it's gonna be one of those things once the dominoes start falling. It'll go state by state, except for Wisconsin. Supply chain issues, I won't talk too much about that because I think you all know it, live it, but the big issue, certainly for brewers, is cans. Aluminum cans are extremely difficult to get a hold of. And there are multiple reasons for that we won't get into because I think trade press is pretty much taking care of that. One thing I did want to bring up with respect to taxation of alcohol beverages, I'm going to skip ahead to the hard seltzers because it's probably 5 years ago, I had a staffer in a legislative office reach out to me because they were curious about what I would think about this bill that they had drafted to legalize home distilling. I'm only talking about this, I think that just got shot down pretty hard. So now I'm talking about it. But in part of that bill, the way they were describing what you were allowed to do if home distilling was legalized, it dawned on me that we only have definitions for fermented malt beverage and intoxicating liquor in statute, in Wisconsin state statute. And that's an interesting conundrum when we now have a lot of hard seltzers that are sugar-based. And it dawned on me when I was looking at this bill, I was like, you know what? I just realized that all these sugar-based hard seltzers technically meet the definition of intoxicating liquor in Wisconsin. So federally, they're regulated and taxed as beer. Everybody just assumed because you had hard seltzers and like hard lemonade and all that stuff, those are fermented malt beverages, right? Nobody really took notice that, yeah, there's no malt in here. And then what I realized too was that we have a couple of breweries that make gluten-free beers. The way state statute is written, those gluten-free beers don't meet the definition of fermented malt beverage. They actually meet the definition of intoxicating liquor, which means you would have to get a distillery to make it, and you would have to pay the liquor tax. So nobody pays attention to this stuff other than nerds like me and Jeff. So, but it turns out just this session. So earlier I mentioned there was a DOR bill and a request about all these fines and penalties and things like that. And when I see things like that, what I'm thinking is if they catch on that there's we have a lot of breweries that are making these sugar-based hard seltzers. They suddenly catch on with law enforcement and bigger penalties for an innocent mistake that they didn't even know existed, that technically these hard seltzers are intoxicating liquor, even though everybody is making them, setting their beer tax in. That always catches my attention because I don't want any enforcement actions to come down the line because DOR wasn't paying attention. Well, it turns out DOR finally caught on. So all these penalties in this bill that's listed in committee, which we just kind of like, we were successfully able to say, yeah, that's not going to happen. So with a lot of help, we shut that down. But they came back with a revised version of that bill that probably will see some light of day at some point that actually fixes that issue. So if you're making sugar-based hard seltzers or you're making gluten-free beers, don't worry. Now fall under the definition or the exception to the definition for fermented malt beverages. So even yes.
I have a question about that. So yeah. Like for the ready-to-drink cocktails.
Yes.
Because I was just looking at this for our business. Like a can of ready-to-drink cocktails like 36 cents per tax, and a can of beer is like 0.5 cents.
That's a perfect segue into my next topic. RTD cocktails. That's an astute observation. So this is going to be part of the big tax fight going forward. And I know that on the distilling side, and this is going to create some tension between brewers and distillers. I'm sure. Is that issue is at least in Wisconsin, the state tax. So you think about this: if you go to a tavern and you get a brandy old fashioned in a cocktail glass, you get it mixed on site. The tax that your purchase contributes to that, a couple ounces of brandy in that cocktail is I don't know, it's what, it's like 4 cents or something like that. Does that sound right?
It doesn't matter.
Okay, yeah, I think it's not different. Right, so in that case, it doesn't matter what the rest of the contents of that glass is. The only thing in that glass that's being taxed is the brandy, right? If you get a brandy old fashioned that's an RTD in a can, it's the exact same alcohol content, the exact same volume as the mixed cocktail at the bar. You're paying an excise tax on the full volume that's inside that can. So all the mixers that were put in that can is actually being taxed as liquor. Right? Well, and so from your perspective, it is ridiculous. From the brewer perspective, we have it. And this is where tension will rise, I'm sure. And I think we'll be okay for a while because, kind of going backwards here, Wisconsin Policy Forum, it's a nonpartisan policy research organization. They do pretty good work. But they, earlier this year, released this report on a large increase in excise tax collection in Wisconsin. And they drew the conclusion that that meant there was a large increase in alcohol consumption during the pandemic, which actually a lot of sales data, scan data, and public opinion surveys don't really support that. There was a modest increase in alcohol consumption, but it really didn't change all that much based on actual sales data. So they tried to make the connection that the tax was equivalent or correlated with consumption. That's where that issue of me sitting down and penciling out math, thinking right when the pandemic hits, RTDs, the cocktails on a can, are exploding, right? Suddenly there's a whole bunch of aluminum cans going to that stuff. Now there's no aluminum for small breweries, right? Because Gallo and whoever the cup water guys are, they're eating up all these cans, right? So it dawned on me that I checked in with the Brewers Association staff at Thomas Park Watson. It's awesome. And you know, he was kind of like, yeah, it's a little bit fishy because I think 2 things. Pandemic hits, you can't go out to bars and taverns. What's everybody do? They stock their home bar. You go out to the liquor stores and grocery stores, you're buying bottles of liquor. Like if you're an occasional cocktail drinker, you're buying bottles, right? So everybody's stocking their home bar all at the same time. Makes sense. There's all this, but that doesn't mean they're drinking at all, right? Right? They're just stocking their home bar. And the RTDs, the explosion of RTDs probably contributed to that. Sure enough, that data that they were using was mostly an increase in the spirits tax collections from DOR. So that'll probably level out as the year goes on. She said before that. But I mentioned that because just today, the Wisconsin Policy Forum, it's hit the newspapers. You may have seen that they issued this report that they noted a 25% increase in alcohol-induced deaths in Wisconsin, which tracks nationwide patterns as well. We're a little bit above that, so I guess it's remarkable that we're a little average in that regard. But it's a reminder that those are real issues that affect your businesses, the perception of your businesses, things like that. So when it comes to what we will probably see as the desire to have what is being referred to as tax equivalents for the RTDs that are the same ABV as some beers might be, setting aside the trade position and talking points on those things. The Craft Beverage Modernization Tax Reform Act was made permanent earlier this year, right? That's the excise tax reduction that you all, you know, that I marched my butt off to Washington, D.C. too many times to keep it crazy. That was basically my job organizing. So you got an excise tax reduction, right? You're seeing these reports on scary reports of alcohol use deaths. The solution is always going to be we need to limit access, we need to raise taxes. Raise taxes is always like that's the solution, as if prohibition never exists, right? We all know the lessons of prohibition. Some choose to learn from those lessons, others don't. I don't think it would be a good time to make these tax because it would have equivalence would effectively be a tax cut. It's probably a bad time to go marching into the Capitol and ask for a tax cut. So the road ahead, your guess is as good as mine. I'm always curious to hear what's going on out there in the market. Any questions I have for you?
Really appreciate it. So we are almost done boring you. We're going to spend a little bit of time talking about some legal issues that we've been running across in our practice, some things that we've been seeing throughout the industry. I'm going to, in general here, we're going to talk about multi-state distribution. We're seeing a lot of people wanting to leave the state. I don't mean that in a negative way. I mean that in an entirely positive way. We're going to talk a little bit about multiple permitted sites. Then we're going to talk a little bit about some contract manufacturing that we're starting to see. And then finally, we'll talk a little bit about trends. So I'm going to have Ogden Glazer Schaefer, one of our attorneys at OGS. He's going to talk to us a little bit about some of the multi-state distribution issues that we've been seeing. We've been dealing with that in our office. So, Colin.
I think you put me last, but I mean, I think to Jeff's point, there's a desire to reach outside of Wisconsin, and I think that for us, you know, to Mark's point about sort of our very best of both, we have like the most extreme version of the three-tier system. When you make a choice in Wisconsin, it's going to affect you when you go outside. So, for example, like we have recipe brewer status here in Wisconsin. This is the only place that exists that I'm aware of. And that means at the federal level, you're a wholesaler, but in Wisconsin, you're a brewer. Sounds awesome. You get all of the benefits of being a brewer in Wisconsin. When you try to go outside of the state, for example, you're going to be treated as a wholesaler because most states will look whatever your federal status is. So we're talking about shipping beer, states that allow shipping beer. You can't do that a lot of times if you're a wholesaler, or the carve out or companies that you might go to, you know, are not going to know how to deal with you because you're operating under a federal paradigm. They're not really clear. So I think, you know, the point is, number one, you know, if sometimes it's hard to know the future, obviously, but if you have that desire, definitely a thing to think about. The good news is like, there's no problem that can't be fixed. Okay, I mean, there's really no problem. A lot of this, you know, a lot of the permitting and everything, you guys know this, it's a lot of paperwork. So if you're good at paperwork, you can make it happen, you know. I think that the other thing to think about is, you know, I am a very big proponent, and a lot of you guys probably have a very good relationship with the Department of Revenue. Every law or every, you know, for example, we talked about the definition of you know, how we define alcohol in the statutes. In Illinois, they just define it as intoxicating liquors. How confusing is that? What the heck does that mean? Intoxicating liquor, that's everything. I'm a big proponent of building a personal relationship that you need because every state is going to be different. And every state is going to have a certain law. But the interesting thing about this industry is if you read the statute, it really does not tell you too much. It's like, wow, that sounds simple. Yeah. But then you read Department of Revenue regulations, and it's way more nuanced. And then depending on the person you talk to, they interpret the regulations slightly different. And there's nothing wrong with that. That's human nature. But as you extend to other states, it's certainly important to start building those relationships too. And so what I say to our clients is, it's never bad to make a phone call, right? Because these are the people that you're going to have to be dealing with on a somewhat regular basis. So that's also what I would advocate for. If you have a desire to stand outside of the state, you know, Illinois is something that we're dealing with, obviously. We're pretty close to the border on a pretty regular basis. Start building those relationships now. So, for example, in Illinois, you have to have a pre-existing relationship with a distributor. There is self-distribution exemptions, but in Wisconsin, like that whole concept doesn't really exist. Interesting, right? So to what Erica was saying, as far as about building relationships, even across, you know, let's say the three industry aisles, it's still really, really important because sometimes regulation is forcing you to do that. So I don't really have more to say about. I'm happy to answer any direct questions, you know, especially after the presentation about hey, what is the deal with this state, et cetera. But I think that from a 30,000 foot view, those are the two takeaways. Like, if multi-state is in your future, think about your setup here, especially at the federal level. And also, don't be afraid to reach out. I think that there's this whole idea that like Department of Revenue, sometimes Department of Revenue generally, state to state is somewhat scary. Sometimes it is, but I feel like most of the people there are just also struggling to understand the rules just like we are, you know, and human relations goes a long way. So that's all for me. Really appreciate you guys being here.
I think the point that Colin makes is really well placed. Everybody's really trying to figure all of this out. This includes the regulators. This becomes a critically important point when it comes to multiple permitted facilities. So one of the trends that we've seen, and I'm sure you are all familiar with, is that facilities are looking to become permitted across multiple types of productions, right? We're seeing more and more breweries that are taking on winery permits because they want to start making cider or they want to start making wine. We're seeing distilleries that want to start brewing beer or vice versa. We're seeing brand new facilities that are tourist destinations that want to be brewery, winery, distillery facilities that draw people from all over the region to come in. And if you think about the permitting that's required in order to just set up the one facility, as soon as you start adding multiple permit types on that, you increase the complexity significantly. And everybody's trying to figure out how to make this work. And we're lucky here in the state of Wisconsin. And, Colin mentioned that we have, the laws here, everybody likes to bitch about how bad the laws are in the state of Wisconsin, but I would challenge any of you to go to the state of Minnesota or try Texas sometime. So grand scheme of things, we have things okay here, and it allows us to even have multiple permitted facilities. So, but it's still a relatively unique concept. Even as recently as 10 years ago, we'll say a brewery was a brewery, a winery was a winery, a distillery was a distillery. And today, we're seeing people who they want to make ready-to-drink cocktails, they want to make hard seltzers, they want to make beer and wines and ciders and cocktail or distilled spirits, whatever it might be. And so it's really figuring out how do we make all of these things work in one space. And of course, whenever you're dealing with permitting, you're dealing with dividing up your space and thinking about what you're using a particular equipment for at a particular time. So I'm going to jump a little bit. I'm going to sort of combine some of these things because the reason all these things are here is because they're related to each other, right? This idea of multi-state permitting or multi-state distribution and multiple permitting. The contract production comes into this because when you are doing multiple permitting, you may have alternating proprietorship relationships with yourself even. And so you may have equipment that you're using for beer one day, but you're using for distilled spirits another day, right? Well, TTB calls that an alternating proprietorship, even though you're alternating with yourself, right? And so how do you set up that relationship and how do you make sure that you're capturing what beverage is flowing through the equipment at what time, right? And there are different rules around where you're allowed to store beer, where you're allowed to store wine, where you're allowed to store spirits, right? And so as soon as you have, is it tax paid, is it untaxed paid, right? And as soon as you start adding all of these things together and you have beer next to spirits, next to wine, the location, the layouts within your facilities can get very complicated. So how can we draw maps to make sure that we're complying with all the permit requirements? How can we make sure we're designing our space in a way that makes sense? And everybody's sort of trying to figure this out, right? We've managed to do this a small hand. We've managed to do this a handful of times. The state of Wisconsin is trying to figure out and keep up with it. The federal government is trying to figure it out and keep up with it. This is all new to everybody. And the good news is that the rules here are starting to relax a little bit. When we were first starting to do this, there were a lot of rules around, no, you really need the spirits over here in a locked cage, and you have to use entirely separate equipment for this stuff, and you have to have your distilled spirits tasting room separated from your beer tasting room. And we're starting to see a lot of those things going on, right? We're starting to work with regulators who are saying, we really don't, we can just draw a line on the floor, right? Everybody, if we just draw a line, nobody will cross the line, right? If we put the spirits over there, we put the beer over here, nobody can cross the line. So we just draw a line on the floor and say that's the spirit side, this is the beer side. Everybody just sort of and we're starting to see a little bit more movement amongst the regulators as they're getting more comfortable with these kinds of facilities. And so that's been really nice. And as a result, we're starting to see a lot more interest in multi-permit facilities. Along with that is, I don't know if I would call it an increase. I think it's a relatively steady state in contract manufacturing. I think the contract manufacturing that's going on is becoming far more sophisticated. One of the things, it used to be that if you wanted to start up a brand, you went and did a contract brew somewhere, you did that for maybe a year or two, and it either worked or it didn't, and you did your own thing, and spun off. But we're really seeing manufacturers, we're seeing breweries, we're seeing wineries, we're seeing distilleries becoming much more sophisticated with how, where, and when they do their manufacturing. So, if they want to brew, a small batch here and do a collaboration with somebody over here, and maybe we actually want to start doing some stuff in another state. So maybe we should talk to a manufacturer there and just contract it there, or do a collaboration with somebody in the state. So we're really seeing a whole different level of sophistication. We're starting to see more sophisticated brand management and manufacturers, suppliers that don't have their own facilities at all. They're scrambling together a variety of contract manufacturing relationships, and they themselves don't own any steel but have national distribution for brands that are very popular across the country. And so stringing together a variety of contract manufacturing can really become complicated, particularly once you start doing it across permit types. Because here in Wisconsin, at least, contract brewing is a well-regarded tradition. Contract brewing here is a well-regarded tradition. Contract winemaking and contract spirits is a whole different ballgame. And so, in order to do those things correctly, we really need to be putting some effort into what does that relationship look like? What exactly is happening? Who's in charge of what at what time? And where are we? Where is the final product? Who's actually taking possession of stuff? How is it getting shipped? These are all questions that we have to work out ahead of time because the relationships are just becoming much more sophisticated. And I think that's been great in the industry. It's resulted in a lot of new brands and a lot of new and innovative companies that are doing some interesting things. And to Colin's talk about distribution, just to sort of tie a bow on this, one of the things that we're seeing that sort of puts all of these things together, right, is the contract manufacturer who engages with what I would call tactical distribution, right? You have all these you have some distributors around the country. I think of somebody like Pipeline, where you engage with them for a single relationship, or you're engaging with them for a single brand, or you're engaging with them for a single thing. I want to get this brand into a stadium for a particular event in another state. So I engage with a distributor for that particular purpose, right? And we're combining all three of these things. We're combining distribution, we're combining contract manufacturing, and we're combining multiple permit types in order to get product around. It's really exciting, but it's definitely pushing the boundaries of where the laws are, and the regulators just don't know how to deal with it. And so, so a lot of where we've been spending some of our time has been working with regulators to help them understand and get comfortable with there's really not anything going on here. We're not doing anything that bizarre. It's just taking advantage of things that already exist. And there's nothing too weird going on. And so the good news is regulators become far more comfortable. And we're starting to see them become much looser in terms of the rules that they're imposing on us. So from a legal perspective, those are the things that we're seeing. Some of the trends that are coming up in the industry run into legal issues very, very quickly. The first one here actually doesn't run into legal issues very, very quickly. This is the no and low ABV stuff. This has been sort of a trend for the last couple of years. It's predicted to really increase this year. We're starting to see no alcohol or low alcohol spirits, low alcohol, low ABV beers. You might see wines or things that are ready to drink mocktails. And of course, the nice thing about things that are no alcohol is you don't need permits for those things. But the catch to that is if it ever had alcohol in it during the manufacturing process, you do need a permit for it. So it becomes a question of how are these things being manufactured. So the no and low ABVs, the good news is often there's not a whole lot of regulation that comes along with it, except when there is. So it's helping to understand the processes that are going on and really making sure people what's going on. The other thing, the next thing that we're seeing increasingly is CBD and Delta 8 in alcohol beverage products or in beverage products generally. There's sort of two rules around this that are in direct conflict with each other that make this a really hard space to play. So for people that want to push the envelope, we're seeing people sort of getting out there and trying and seeing where it goes. For those that aren't interested in pushing the envelope, I would assert to you, you should not be pushing in this space. The short of it is, the FDA has one rule, the Food and Drug Administration has one rule when it comes to CBD and Delta 8 in food and beverage products. The good news is, those rules don't always apply if the product stays entirely in the state. The state of Wisconsin has said, we don't consider CBD and Delta 8 to be inherently adulterated. Right? So just because you put it in doesn't mean we, the state of Wisconsin, think it's inherently adulterated. So as long as the product is made entirely within the state of Wisconsin, and I'm going to put an asterisk on this, but I'm going to say sort of the safe end of this is the hemp was grown here, hemp was processed here, hemp was sold here to a manufacturer here who made it here, who then sold it here. If that entire chain happens inside of the state of Wisconsin, we are maybe okay. Anything other than that, probably.
Can I add a comment?
Yes.
I'm not making this up, but if, for example, it's a carbonated beverage, this has actually been interpreted that CO2 does not stay within your state's borders. So if it's carbonated with CO2 that was sourced from the air in some way, shape, or form, it's interstate commerce and it would run afoul of that. I doubt anybody's going to enforce that. But it actually has been. It actually has been enforced, not alcohol beverages. The other thing I would say is, like, as long as those beverages with CBD or Delta 8 don't have alcohol.
Yeah.
Because that's the issue. If there's alcohol, you can't do that stuff because it's not generally recognized as
right. Safe. It's not generally recognized as safe, so it doesn't fall within things that are allowed to put into alcohol beverages. It's certainly not on. It's certainly not on the the TTB recipe approval exemption list. So you're taking a lot of risk, but we're definitely getting a lot of people who are interested and a few people who are brave enough to try it. So we're seeing some movement there. Real quickly, sort of outside of necessarily alcohol in particular, but trends that are coming up in this year that have sort of carried over from COVID in going forward is sort of the big worker rights movement that's been happening, that's been really impacting ownership and trying to figure out how can we make sure that our employees are taken care of. And so we're really starting to see a lot of people who are now much more interested in employee benefits, in employee handbooks, and in making sure that their employees are being heard and are being treated correctly, are being brought into ownership groups, right? Are given decision-making power within companies. And so whenever we have those kinds of issues, we want to make sure that we have a business structure that can support bringing in voices that may not have been accounted for when the company was set up. So often this can be handled relatively easily, but sometimes it's, it's just take a look at your documents, make sure everything's kosher. If we need to get a new handbook made for you, or if we need to get, we need to work on some of the benefits issues. Those are things that are definitely going to be an issue. And then finally, the direct to consumer. Again, we're seeing a lot of this because here in Wisconsin, you cannot deliver beer to the door. Despite the fact that Taver will in fact deliver beer to your door. So, and there are a number of states around the country where you can't deliver beer to the door, but yet you can find these tactical distributors who will take on that risk for you. And they have a perhaps more cavalier attitude towards the law that you may be comfortable with. You should make sure that you are comfortable with their attitude towards the law, because there is no guarantee that if they end up putting your beer into a state where it's not supposed to be, that that's not going to come back on you. Because at the end of the day, it's your product that ends up in the hands of the consumer, particularly in a direct-to-consumer relationship, where the whole reason that tactical distributor is bringing you on is for the purpose of putting your beer into your into the hands of somebody who's trying. So we need to be eyes wide open on that. And I know a lot of people are hearing the sales pitches from these distribution companies that are saying, oh, no, we have that taken care of. We know all the rules. We're good. We know what's going on. But then they turn around and they're delivering beer into the state of Wisconsin, which we know is wrong. So you need to be thinking about your level of comfort, really understanding what it is that you can be doing with your brands, putting it in a relationship with those distributors that appropriately allocates risk for those kinds of decisions, and just making sure that you understand how your product is getting from your point A to the product. So yeah, question.
Do you know of any factors come back, manufacturers, or for that matter,
luckily, I have not heard of any enforcement actions on particular manufacturers. I have heard of manufacturers sort of getting the please don't do this again letters, but I haven't. None of my clients, at least, have gotten enforcement actions for. So that's what I have for you guys today. I really appreciate all of your time. I don't see the folks for Hop House, but I really want to thank Hop House for allowing us to be here.
Two things, just to add on, one of the things when you were talking about being an alt prop for yourself, the ridiculousness of all that, that's actually part of that executive order that I talked about from the Biden administration that was directing Treasury to review things like this, things that don't make sense anymore. So fingers crossed. I mean, that report was supposed to be out November 3rd. Clearly, they got so many comments that they're way past that deadline. But fingers crossed that dumb things like that, the Secretary of the Treasury will point out that doesn't make sense anymore. On the direct, you call them tactical distributors?
Yeah, I don't know what they're actually.
Okay.
I just call them tactical distributors.
So what's interesting is like as Jeff said, it's not legal to have beer delivered to your door in Wisconsin, but there are entities that do it. What they're doing is they're relying on the Uniform Commercial Code, which basically there's a Uniform Law Commission that existed for a long time, and they would come up with common laws that they think every state should adopt. And the issue of interstate commerce was like, well, we need all states to have very similar laws on what governs the terms of a sale, right? So what these entities are doing is they're saying the Uniform Commercial Code in these states says that the terms of the sale are agreed to by the parties, right? And it often hinges on where the sales takes place. So if you order something online from a place in California, you're sitting right here right now. You tell me, where does the sale occur? Does it occur here or does it occur in California? Generally, if the sale occurs,
Whoever said where you want it to occur is right.
that's basically how it works. So the argument they're using is saying, and you'll see on their websites, they'll put this disclaimer up there before you click the button that says, you are agreeing that the terms of this sale dictate that the sale is occurring in the state of California. So that way they're saying they're covering their butt because we're not selling in Wisconsin, we're selling in California. Whatever happens after it leaves our door on the third-party carrier, not our problem. And Wisconsin will say like, yeah, you're right. Whoever, when you take title to the product, that's when that's where the tension really is. That argument has not performed well in court, so it was shot down in the Mississippi Supreme Court. But that's how they're doing it.
This is not the first time courts have looked at UCC terms of sale. Is that no?
Right.
Yeah. I glossed over that a little because I agree. I think it's a bit of a specious claim, but a lot of people are relying on it. I think we're going to start seeing that get shut down for exactly reasons.
Yeah. I know that you've talked a lot about state laws and regulations and things that are going around the state of Wisconsin, but bringing it down to a city level, can anybody make any comments on upcoming expiration of streetery? Or I know that's a restaurant-based thing or whatnot, but you've got a special or unique situation where we're just kind of curious if something like that's going to renew or continue or come in a different form or anything like that.
I don't have any special insight other than to say that in conversations that I've had with city attorneys in Madison or with other folks who are involved with sort of the streetery program in the city of Madison, I haven't talked to them in the last week about these issues, but they've all been very excited about the streetery program. And everything that I've heard from the city of Madison is that they want that program to continue well past COVID and whatever the immediate moment is. So I think ideally everybody wants it to continue. I think the real problem is going to be whether city traffic can allow it to continue to happen, and whether the demands on the city streets are going to force a change to what everybody wants to happen. But I think for the short term in particular, I think we're going to continue to see it happen. It's just public. It's just my opinion. I don't think my opinion is that I think we're going to continue to see programs like the streetery program here in Madison. There are similar programs in other municipalities in the state. And I think people want to see them continue to happen because they've been very, very successful.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate it.
So that's all we have for you. Thank you all for coming. We really appreciate it.